All right, we'll get started now. Welcome everybody to today's webinar on CAS 360. This is a webinar in part of the CAS 360 Education Week, and this is actually the last webinar that's being done for that. I'll run through a process that you can do in order to catch the other webinars if you may have missed those. But we'd like to firstly thank you if you attended any of the other sessions or even just attending this session. Thank you very much for attending these webinars. So today's webinar is on commonly prepared forms, effectively how to get them completed in CAS 360, how to prepare them, and what requirements are needed in order to prepare these and send these off to ASIC in order to get those forms properly lodged. We'll begin just with some housekeeping matters. As I did mention, this is a part of the CAS 360 Education Week, where we had a number of topics being spoken about over the past week. If you did miss any of those, you can check them out on BGL's YouTube channel, as well as they are available on the CAS community. What I'll do is I'll just post that link here in chat to BGL's YouTube channel. So after the webinar today, if you wanted to have a look at some of the other presentations that we've done throughout the week, you can do so. There are a number of forms in this particular presentation, this webinar today, that I will be glossing over just because they've been gone into more detail in other webinars there, and I'll mention that as we go along. So I'd highly recommend checking out some of those webinars that dive into more depth on these matters. The next note is that all participants are on listen-only mode. However, if you do have any questions, there is the Q&A feature in Zoom in the bottom left-hand corner there, where you can actually ask any questions along the way. I have some colleagues with me here from the training and documentation team who'll be able to answer your questions. So if you have any of those, feel free to ask during the session. Perfect. So let's have a look at the agenda for today. These are generally some of the most common forms that we see submitted and processed through CAS 360, as well as we will be mentioning a couple of others as they coincide with these particular forms. So as you can see on the screen, these will be the forms that we'll be going through today, starting with Form 201, starting with the registration for a company, and then finishing up with the voluntary deregistration for a company. So starting out, looking at Form 201, this form being used for the registration of an Australian company. My colleague actually did a webinar on this yesterday to do with company incorporations that goes into much more detail into what's required in setting up a company and registering it in CAS 360. So I'd highly recommend going to check out the company incorporations webinar that was previously done. But as a quick overview, if you were looking to prepare one of these forms, it's done via the company registration screen, where you can then add a new company. You go through the process into entering all the details for that company, and then you can choose to prepare the forms. Now, please note that the ASIC direct debit account is required for company registrations. So that is the RA04. So that is required before you actually go through the process of completing that Form 201 and lodging that one. So let's jump over to CAS 360 and have a look at how to get this form prepared just very quickly. As I mentioned, it was discussed in the previous webinar, so we're just going to go through it very quickly. We're on the company screen, the company selection screen, and then you can select company registrations up the top. From here, you just go to add a new company through the company registrations. Select a jurisdiction, and then from here, you're actually prompted with a pop-up screen where you can fill out a variety of details here. I'm just going to put in a random business name here. So you'd be filling out all your details and continuing forward, entering the address, officers, shareholders, additional options, anything that is appropriate to the company. And as I mentioned, all of these have gone into more detail in the previous webinar. Finally, once you're finished, you have the option to save and prepare, which once completed, will prepare these documents that are available for you. So Form 201, the company incorporation document. So it's going to fill out the form based on the details that you previously entered, and that form is now available for you there. So we're not going to go into any further detail into that. Once again, for the last time, if you're looking for more details, the company incorporations webinar. Let's jump back over to the PowerPoint now. move on to the second form, which is Form 205, which is the Notice of Resolutions, specifically to do with company name changes and changes to company type today. So there's two main sections that we're going to focus on with this one, first being the company name changes. This is actually done after selecting the company. You can go to the name registration screen and choose to add a name. After submitting that and lodging that name registration to ASIC, the name change certificate will be received from ASIC so long as you submit. If you lodge the form via CAS 360, then ASIC will send that form and it will be received into ASIC to CAS 360, and then the pending status would be updated in the name registration screen. However, if it's not received in CAS 360, we can go around and basically manually set that one so it's not pending anymore. And the form to go along with this would be the company name reservations. So we'll quickly gloss over that form 410 as well. So let's quickly jump over back into CAS 360 now. So I'm going to select a company I've set up previously. So we're selected a company and heading into name registrations. So on this screen, we have the option to add a name. If we were looking for the name reservations, that is here, that second option there. You can click that, choose a particular proposed name. So we'll go training, test. I'll just put in a random name here. And you'll have a couple of options to fill out, whether the name was the same as an existing business name. In terms of the company type and company class, this is based on the company that you have selected, and you'll have the option to pick an officer as an applicant for this one. So after clicking Save and Prepare, that one would actually prepare the form 410. So that's the name reservation. That's showing now in the name registration screen as a reserved company name. Looking at the form 205, so actually looking to change the company name, that's the top option here. So selecting to do the company name change, you have a couple options such as to use the ACN as the company name. Otherwise, you can choose a particular company name. So we're going to choose that same one, Training Test Pty Ltd. Says that one's available, and it has a question. Has a name reservation been lodged to reserve the proposed new company name? So if you've submitted that form 410, you can select this option to say yes, and then you have the option to input the reservation number and expiry date for that name registration. If not, you can just leave that as no. A couple other options here being, is the proposed name identical to a registered business name? You have the option to tick yes, where you can enter the ABN for that existing registered business name. And then you have the option as well, would you like the name change to be manually reviewed by ASIC? Once you're happy with those details, filling those out, you can click Save and Prepare Documents. It'll show the details of the resolution, which you can edit if desired. And then we can save and prepare forms. So we have the form 205 here, the notification of resolution. And what that will actually do, if we exit out of this, is it will add a company name to the company, the name registration screen. As I mentioned previously, it is still pending at the moment. If I were to lodge this directly with CAS 360 to ASIC, and ASIC were to approve that, we receive the name change certificate back, and this automatically updates from pending to an effective date. If the name change certificate isn't received by CAS 360, to update this from pending, just select options on the right side and select to remove the pending status. You can choose the effective date for that one there, click Save, and then it will automatically fill this out so that it's no longer pending. So that's an outline of the company name changes. The other main form that we have, or the main change we have related to Form 205, is changes to company type. This one is also done after selecting the company, heading to General Details, and then making a change to the company type or class. And it's only relevant to particular changes that occur for the company. If you do make one of those changes, the Prepare Forms button will actually show up for you and prompt you to actually generate those forms for you. And I'll show you exactly what that looks like now. So heading back into CAS 360, we're just heading to the General Details screen after selecting that company. So we have our company selected, General Details, and we have the company status here. Looking at the company type, As an example, if we change it from small proprietary to a public company, it'll prompt us to prepare forms here. If we click that prepare forms, it shows some details about the changes we're making to the company type, where you can change that if desired, and then click to save and prepare documents. Once again, it shows details of the resolution if you wanted to edit that there. And then it will generate the form 205 along with form 206, which comes along with changing the company type. As I mentioned, this form is only generated for certain changes to the company type and company class here. If, for instance, I were to change this from small proprietary to large proprietary, you'll notice that the prepare forms button doesn't actually show up. That's because that particular change doesn't require the forms to be generated. If you were confused about this and were looking to see if your situation required this form to be generated, then I'd recommend checking out the article we have related to form 205 and 206, and I'll actually bring that up now. So going to the Knowledge Center, we'll just search up form 205, 206, changes to company type and class. So you can do this by just heading to the Knowledge Center, and it shows some details about the changes that will actually generate a form. So for instance, public to proprietary, proprietary to public, so on and so forth. So if your change fell into one of these categories, then you would expect that prepare forms button to show up, and then you could prepare those forms and go ahead with it. If you did have any questions about any of these forms as well, what I'd highly recommend is definitely checking out the Knowledge Center. We have articles basically around every single form that is commonly produced here, and instructions for the process. So if you were having some issues, they might be able to provide assistance if you were getting stuck along the way. So that is the changes to company type and class. Moving on, now we're getting more into the agent-specific forms. Firstly is form 361, which is stating that the registered agent is ceasing to act. This one is specifically done on the company selection screen, and it does require the companies that you're submitting the form for to be active in CAS 360. Deactivated companies cannot be selected, and I'll actually show an example of that. And in terms of this form, multiple companies can be selected because it is the registered agent that is the signatory for this one here. Jumping back over into CAS 360, we're heading to the company screen, company selection screen, and the option to prepare form 361 is right here. Select prepare agent forms and form 361. What I'm quickly going to do is I'll change that company we have been using for today's webinar, and I'm actually going to deactivate the company. So now that company is currently deactivated. If I go to prepare the agent form 361, it shows that the agent we have selected is this one here. And if I try to select it, so I type in training, the company that we previously had selected is not showing up, so we can't actually select that. If that situation does happen to you, and you have actually deactivated the company, you can click deactivated companies on the left here, find the company you were looking for, and click restore on the right side. After clicking restore, that'll bring the company back into the company selection screen, where you can then go to prepare form 361 and select that particular company. As I mentioned before, you can actually select multiple companies with this, so we can go ahead and select all of these companies. If you were ceasing to act with all of these companies, this would be the best process to complete. And you can click prepare forms, which then will generate form 361. Having a look at that, you can see that all of the companies we have selected have been filled out on this form. So that's form 361. Jumping back to the PowerPoint here, we'll move on to form 362, which is the registered agent appointment and cessation. This is also done on the company selection screen, and there is two different ways generally, two main ways in order to prepare this particular form. However, because this form requires an officer as a signatory, you can only do one company per form. Because it is company specific, because you need that officer selected, you can only do one company here. We'll jump back into CAS 360, and I'll show you exactly what that looks like. So you have the option to select Prepare Agent Form and select Form 362 here, where you can select the relevant company, and then it'll automatically fill out the form signatory based on the offices you have entered previously. And you can also select the agent here. The other option I mentioned is if you look for the specific company here in the company selection screen, head to the right side and click Options. You can choose to edit the company, where it gives you a prompt to save and prepare Form 362. That warning is just coming up because of the fact that we have that number in the training environment multiple times, so that shouldn't appear for you there. And then we have the option to select the form signatory exactly like we previously did. What I'll actually show you now is where we're actually getting that form signatory from. So I'm going to open up this company here, head to the officers screen, and you can see we have appointed John Jones and Mary Tam as our officers. If, for instance, excuse me, if, for instance, these officers were not here, so let's actually delete both of these officers and remove them, and head back to prepare Form 362, selecting the company, then it's not going to pick a form signatory because there's no officers available. So just make sure if you're unable to select a form signatory that the officers screen has been filled out and there is a contact that is currently entered there. Let me just put them back. We'll add John Jones there as a director and appointed. Set that at the beginning of the company there. We'll just add that back for now. So yeah, to recap, it is one change, one registration per form because of the officer requirement. They are the signatory for that, and you do need them for the Form 362. Moving on to Form 484. This is one of the biggest forms because it includes a large number of different changes to do with companies. As you see, it's the changes to company details form. This includes making changes to the addresses, offices, or the shareholder screen. And after any of these changes are made, we can choose to click Prepare Forms on the bottom right. Alternatively, we can use the multiple changes screen to actually make these changes, and I'll run through that process very shortly. So jumping back into CAS, we can select this particular company, and you can see we have the addresses, offices, and shareholders screen. If we click into these screens, you can see the addresses, offices, and shareholders. And if I were to make a change, let's add Mary Tam back as a secretary. So let's select Mary Tam, select them as a secretary. That date is fine. We'll click Save. Then you can see that the print toggle is automatically toggled on, and we have the option to prepare forms in the bottom right. If we click that Prepare Forms button, that will actually generate a Form 484. So we'll look at that particular document, and you can see it has printed out the appointment of a company office holder in this particular section here. As I mentioned, you can actually input multiple changes on this form. So for instance, let's say we wanted to print out this register office address change, you can toggle on that print option there. As well as if we wanted to add shareholder changes to this particular form, we can toggle those options on as well. You can see that the Prepare Forms button has actually increased to a total of 4. And if we actually click into the Form 484, you'll now notice that we do have the change of address section, which is currently filled out, saying that the registered office address has changed. We do have the appointment of the company office holder that we previously had, and we have the section talking about the share changes and has filled out those details for us there, being the ordinary shares that have been appointed, or allotted, I should say. So as you toggle more of these options on, these options to print next to these changes, that will actually add more changes that will fill out that Form 484 when you're printing that. What we do recommend is actually to limit this to approximately 20, just so that when it comes to reconciling this and basically tracing it back after it might have had some issues with lodgement, it's a much easier process as opposed to waiting through 50 to 100 to 200 changes to a particular company. Now, I did mention you can make changes in the multiple screen as well. So we'll have a quick look at that now. We have multiple changes on the left side here. And what we can do is select a new change. Now, these changes we can actually make to multiple companies, and then we can prepare the forms and submit them separately for each company. Let's say if we wanted to change a registered address, we can pick the company that we were previously using. It shows the current address, and we can select a new address. I'm just going to pick a random address here. There are some options which show, say, is the premises occupied by someone else other than the company? If you toggled yes, you can enter those details there. If you'd like to apply this change to the other company addresses, you can toggle that option and then choose which addresses to apply that to. And then you have the option to apply the change where company registered address is the same. So if you have other companies with the same address being 606 to 608 Hawthorne Road, and you wanted to change those addresses as well, you can click yes, along with contacts for the same thing there. So we're going to click yes because we're going to change these other three companies' addresses at the same time. Once we're happy with that, we click proceed. And then you can see that there are 4 entries here for the 4 companies that we're changing addresses for. You can also see that there's these 3 changes selected to print as well. So the 3 changes down the bottom, those relate to those individual changes that we actually chose to print in the company previously. So you could choose to activate a couple of single changes to addresses, officers, or shareholders in the company, then complete these multiple changes, and then choose to prepare all of these all together. So if we click prepare forms, form 484, then it simply prints out another form as well for this company, this time changing the address to this address in Glen Waverley. If you're not happy with these changes and wanted to reverse them, all you need to do is click options of the top right and delete all multi-change records, or you can go down individually and delete the changes for each company as you go along. So that's an overview of Form 484 and different ways you can complete that one there. Let's just quickly move on to Form 492 or 902, which is the request for correction. This particular document is done via the document screen, and it's done in response to any of the lodged documents that you might have previously done. There are a couple of notes regarding this one and how it can be lodged. If the document was actually lodged electronically, you can lodge Form 492 electronically as well. However, if the form was lodged manually with ASIC, so it was done by a paper lodgement, then electronic lodgement would not be available for that particular form, for the Form 492 in response to that one there. And that's actually detailed in these 2 middle dot points here. So if you're actually looking to prepare a Form 492, what you would require is the doc image number and the date of the originally lodged form. If you have those details, you can actually generate a Form 492 with those details in CAS 360. However, if a form has been lodged in CAS 360, we can simply choose to select and lodge a Form 492. So let's actually have a look in CAS 360 very quickly at this one here. We're heading to the document screen. So for the first option, if it's been lodged in CAS 360, you can see we have a lodged Form 201 here. We can select options on the document screen next to that one and choose to prepare a Form 492. Now, if it's lodged in CAS 360, the doc image number will actually show, but this one isn't showing because we're on the training environment here. So that'll automatically pre-fill for you there. Now, if this is in response to ASIC telling you that you do need to lodge this correction, you can toggle this option yes, which then means it's a Form 902. You can input some details about the correction that is being made and choose to prepare documents. For the second option, so the form is lodged electronically, but it's not in CAS, you can select options up the top right, click to prepare form, and then you can select the company it's being done for,
select a particular form. Let's say it's a change to address. And then you can choose to enter the doc image number and the date of lodgement. That way, that'll actually locate that form for ASIC, and they'll be able to make those corrections. So that's how to prepare a free form 492 or 902 if you toggle the option there. However, if you did actually lodge those changes manually, so the paper lodgement, then form 492 will actually need to be done by paper lodgement as well. So that's form 492. The final form we'll have a quick look at today is form 6010, which is to do with voluntary deregistration for a company. In terms of this, we're looking on the company's screen, and we're looking to change the status to deregistered. If needed, you can change the status to operating and then back to deregistered to re-prepare the form. And in terms of this, there are a couple of requirements before actually submitting this form. You do need any outstanding fees to be paid to ASIC beforehand. And in terms of that, ASIC do recommend lodging for deregistration for at least 2 weeks before the annual review due date, in order to avoid any additional fees, because it does take some time for ASIC to process this and publish the fact that the company is deregistered, so they do require that in advance. Jumping back over, we're going to go back into our company here. And we're just heading down to the status option. If you change it from operating to deregistered, very simply, it has the option to prepare forms. From here, you can select the details for this one, make sure they're correct. Choose if you would like to add a nominee to this particular deregistration, and then choose to prepare the documents, which then will generate the form for you, the voluntary deregistration of the company. Now, as I mentioned, if, for instance, you've set that to deregistered and you've clicked save, suddenly you don't have the option to prepare the form again. If that's the case, but you wanted to prepare that form, you can simply change it back to operating, click save, and then change it back to deregistered once again, which will allow you to prepare the form. So as I mentioned, ASIC do request that you do submit those 2 weeks in advance if you want to avoid those annual review due date fees. And once you've actually submitted this, then ASIC will send back via CAS 360 the voluntary deregistration fee for that particular document there. And that is our last form. That brings us to the end of the webinar. I'd like to thank you all for coming in today and having a look at the webinar. I hope you took some information out of the presentation today. Once again, if you did want further information about any of those specific forms, we do have a number of helpful tools online, such as the Knowledge Center, which includes articles about all those different changes and how they're made, as well as we do have the Learning channel, which includes various different modules that go through the processes in CAS 360. What I'd highly recommend is going through those processes, as well as having a look at some of the other webinars that have been happening over the past week. And all of those can give you a well-rounded knowledge in CAS 360. So once again, I'd like to thank you for today, as well as for the rest of the week. And on behalf of the training and documentation team, we'd like to thank you for attending these sessions. Hopefully, we're looking to do more of these sort of webinar weeks in order to engage more with our clients and engage more and provide you with the solutions to best use this.